Well, welcome everyone. I'm Tom Quigley. I live on the 5th floor. Last month when I did this, someone wrote in the comments that I hadn't introduced myself. So now I'm done. And it's been my pleasure to be the chair of the planning committee for the Empowered Aging Lectures since they began in 2018. We have a wonderful planning group, and I invite them to raise their hands so you can see who some of them are. They're back in the corner and they work hard. The purpose of these programs has been to help us prepare for and become empowered so that we can address big questions and big decisions that we are called upon to make as we age and as we near the end of our lives. The goal has been to help us live fully until just before we die. And so we've brought people from various academic disciplines and professional kinds of work to help us do that. And today we're going to turn our attention to the spiritual life and spirituality and aging, and see if we can uncover some of the gifts and the wisdom from our faith traditions to help us answer those big questions. I want to introduce our esteemed panel, and then we'll enter into a conversation that we're inviting you to be a part of and listen to. And there'll be opportunities for questions and answers as we go on. So let me introduce you to these four. Sanaa Joy Carey is a consulting or a counseling psychologist, Ph.D., and she's been in private practice since the 1970s. She's Muslim, and she's overseen many kinds of meditation and dialogue programs, interfaith programs, and currently is offering an English reading of the Quran on Zoom. James Mirel is a Jewish rabbi who has served in King County since 1974. He's the Rabbi Emeritus of Temple Bnai Torah in Bellevue, and currently serves as the spiritual leader of Congregation Bet Havarim in South King County. He's a frequent visitor here to Timber Ridge, and annually helps us appreciate and enjoy the music of Hanukkah. Rabbi Mirel and his wife Julie live in Seattle. Genio Marinello Roshi was ordained as a Zen Buddhist monk in 1980, and since 1999 has been the abbot of the Seattle Zen Temple on North Beacon Hill. For several years, he was the volunteer Buddhist minister, pastor at the Twin Rivers Correction Center in Monroe. And he served as adjunct faculty at the Seattle campus of Antioch University. Fascinating information that Genio came to Seattle in 1976 to serve as a VISA community organizer in the Central District. And he has been a member of the University Friends meeting since 1983. And finally, the Reverend Sharon Nichols is an ordained minister in the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. She's a musician, and she retired from work in the federal government at the Pentagon working for the Air Force, and then studied theology, graduating in 2013 and being ordained as she turned 69. So Sharon now serves as one of the chaplains and as the Protestant worship coordinator at Horizon House. We're so indebted to all four of you for coming today and for agreeing to be a part of this. So as some of you know, I spent a good part of my professional career working with leaders and members of a variety of faith communities, helping them to come together, coordinate their work, coalesce around issues of concern in the human community, and a whole wide variety of human needs. I learned in that process that bringing people together to respond together to needs in the community really but benefits from an interfaith gift exchange. A willingness of people to come and share their gifts and their insights with each other, and through that process to try to find some common ground. And it's as we find common ground, we are able to be effective in responding to the needs of the wider community. So I also learned that it's important in sharing our various insights and faith traditions for people to try to speak in the first person. We know you, each of you, have great expertise in your faith traditions, but we're asking you today to speak out of your own person and how your faith tradition affects and shapes and guides your life. That's the way we're going to learn best, I think, from each other today. So I invite you, and I invite you to what I hope will be a personal conversation and an interfaith gift exchange. And I want to start it this way. You heard me say that the goal of these lectures has been to help us learn how to live fully until just before we die. So I want to ask you, out of your each of your traditions, what's it mean to live fully? What is a full life? And what does living fully until just before it ends, what does that mean?
I would say that if you get to know yourself and something above you, outside of you, and our relationships with people, then follow your passions. Be open. I mean, my husband and I are doing things we love to do now that we're older, and we have a little more freedom to do that. And so he's playing a big pipe organ in northern Seattle, and I'm doing things I love to do, and so we're living fully. It's exciting.
Thanks for this opportunity, Tom. Really appreciate it. There are three basic principles that I think that I try to live my life by, and I recommend it to each of you. And those are the three principles of love, to be as loving as possible to all that surrounds me, whether it be nature, God, family, friends, or the stranger that I meet. To greet everybody and to be in a relationship of love. And secondly is to each day express gratitude for all the blessings that I have, and there's so many, and to focus on those blessings and say thank you. Thank you to God. Thank you to the universe. Thank you to all of those people and things that bring these blessings to me. And the third one is something from our biblical tradition, is to walk humbly, to be humble, to realize that you're just a very small part of this vast universe, and not to be too puffed up. So have that feeling that even though you have respect for yourself, that really in the context of this whole world and God, you walk humbly. Love, gratitude, and humility.
Wow. Beautiful. I'd like to say just ditto, but I will say a little more. To be honest, I had some things planned that I wanted to say. And when I watched the news this morning, it's like the conditions we are experiencing, thank God, only through the news at this point. But we're witnessing fellow human beings that are going through what I would consider hell. And at the same time, there are beautiful acts of mercy. These people, the same people and others near them, are demonstrating the most beautiful qualities of human beings. They are reaching out to people they don't know. Excuse me, I am getting over laryngitis, so I may, even though it's Ramadan, I may take water. And I look at both, and of course the news will emphasize the negative. But if we listen deeply, we see images, actually many of them, of real compassion. People who are grateful for what they have and are showing love and a sense of humility by sharing what they have with complete strangers, and sometimes many, many of them. In my tradition, we are taught that we as human beings have a dual nature. We are both earthly and spiritual. And in Islam, earthly is not bad. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's the right balance between the two that is the goal. Unfortunately, for many in the modern world, and maybe the world whenever, but certainly now, the emphasis is on the earthly human. And I believe an overemphasis. And if we are to be fully human or fully alive, I believe we have to develop both the inner self, and I don't mean just emotions, I don't mean mental, those are important and good in this world, absolutely. I mean the more subtle awarenesses, gratitude, and humility. The kind of things that come from being honest about our limitations and our dependence on something greater than ourselves every moment. We are not creating our own breath. We are being breathed. Think about it. We're being breathed by the same mystery, each of us. And we accept that. And too often, I take it for granted. It's something to be grateful for. I have been studying Sufic Islam for 32 years, and one of the basic teachings is any breath without the awareness of the giver of breath, or the mystery we call by many names, is a wasted breath. But again, it's balance. It's balance.
So, in considering this question, three things popped up for me. The first is that so often we all have blinders and defenses and walls and gates between one another. And some of that's healthy and necessary, but I prefer to live the fullest joy and sorrow by regularly taking my blinders off. So to live a full life means that I need to commune with something vaster than my defenses and much bigger than my sense of ego identity. I need to commune with something vast and boundless. We say there is a reality even prior to heaven and earth. It has no attachment to form, and it isn't absent from form, incomparably profound and minutely subtle. And don't try to name it. And it's only with a foundation of making an effort every day to commune or realize this communion that's always there, but I'm not always aware of it. When I allow myself to be aware of it through meditation or contemplative prayer, then I have a foundation to live this day fully. How do I live this day fully? What comes to me is that I have to make the best meal with the ingredients I have, not the ingredients I would like to have. So I have to be beyond my preferences. I have lots of likes and dislikes, but I have to be able to make the best meal out of the ingredients I have. And if I do that every day, I'm living this day fully. And I'm living this day in a kind of ordinary, simple, productive way. The third thing, which I think all these faith traditions have in common, is kind of the golden rule. And we say it in Buddhism as to, however innumerable the number of beings are, I vow to care for them all. Now that seems like a big call, and it is. But if I'm not living this day with a caring spirit for all creatures, great and small, animate and inanimate, I'm not living this day fully. So how am I being of service? I'm not excluding myself, but to my family, to my neighborhood, to my faith tradition, to the quality of life in the city, the county, the state, the nation, and the world. How am I expressing in some way with a caring heart, a kind spirit, and definitely humility, some sort of service to the world? And if I can manage those three things, communion with something beyond myself, making the best meal with the ingredients I have, not necessarily the ingredients I would like to have, and doing something kind and caring with humility of service to the world, I'm living a full day. It's a rich day.
Thank you so much, each of you. Let me ask this. Can you name something perhaps unique in your tradition? Whether that's a story, a sacred writing, an action that would give us some greater understanding of, how do we know what to do in order to make those, reach the kinds of goals that you've talked about? Living a full day life. What comes out of your faith tradition that informs that?
I'm not sure this is exactly answering what you're saying, but I wanted to give an example of why I'm even up here my mother, and I'm a preacher's kid, several generations, and when we have family reunions, 9 preachers there. Anyway, my mother taught me that when you're asked to do something, even if there are people all around you that you're sure could do it better, and they don't step forward and it needs to be done, go for it. And if anybody fusses about it later, that's too bad. I mean, just say, please do it next time. You know, but, so I'm up here because I was asked, not thinking that I'm better than a lot of other people, but I want to be here to share that you don't have to be perfect to try something. How are you going to learn anyway, right? And I think Jesus said, come follow me and learn about things and ask for forgiveness when you don't do things perfectly, but don't wait around till you're perfect to behave and try to do anything.
Okay, so the personhood of Jesus is something out of the Christian tradition that gives you some a model for life. How about others of you? Something to share?
2 things come to mind. I think something that is unique in Islam is the deep respect for all the messengers of God that have come before Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them all. There, in the Quran itself, Abraham is mentioned 76 times, I think, and Moses over 120 times. And Jesus, peace be upon all of them, is mentioned quite often, as is his mother. There's a whole chapter in the Quran named after Mary, the Mother of God. I like that. There are 24 prophets actually mentioned in the Quran, and there's a reference, or at least it's an Islamic tradition, that there are 124,000 prophets that could be named. So I think this is unique. The other thing I'd like to say, and I'm not sure it's unique, is a basic teaching is, okay, I mentioned that we're a dual creation. You have an earthly nature and a spiritual nature. We receive the spiritual nature when God breathed of his spirit. That is not unique. It's also in the Bible. And the he is not really gender specific. It's due to English translation because there's no gender in the Arabic for God. But anyway, he breathed his spirit, and with that, the essence of the human being became alive. That essence is called a fitra, and it is pure, it is good. So the teaching is that the essence of every human being is good. But then it gets contaminated by all kinds of things in society and through the person's experience. And then what the purpose of life, and this is getting a little bit heavier than I intended, but is to purify that, to get back to the very essential nature of who we are. And in that nature, in that fitra, we have a knowledge, according to Islam, of good and wrong, a natural knowing.
I wanted to acknowledge that we have a lot of wonderful women in the room. The women are so important in our human world. And so the story I want to bring to you is the story about a woman whose name was Sarah in the book of Genesis, you know. And the lesson from the life of Sarah, I think, is a good lesson for all of us, but particularly for you women. God bless you. You know, she was barren. And God said, Sarah, you are going to have a child. and she was 90 years old. And she laughed. She laughed. Couldn't believe it. But God made a promise, and it came to pass. And what did she call her son that was born to her at that age? Laughter. Because she said, I laughed, but really God had the last laugh. Because here's my son. Laughter. Isaac. Now, I'm saying this to all of us, not just to the women, to everybody. God isn't finished with us. No matter how old we are, there's still many things that we can do. And you never know what the next stage of life will be. So it's not just looking back on our lives, no matter how old we are, but we should always look to the future. There's a future ahead for everybody, and you can do things that you cannot even imagine you can. If it's to be. With your own strength, with God's blessing, you have a wonderful future ahead, and new things will happen, and we can call them miracles or just things that happen. So let's all look to the future.
In Buddhism, we rely on something called the three treasures. And they are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And these are Sanskrit words, but they really apply to spirituality in general. For example, the Buddha means awakened one. And from a Buddhist perspective, there's an awakened one inside of every one of us. So I'm looking at a whole field of Buddhas. And learning how to listen to the ancient sages, and so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but they're, I think, all pointing to a revelatory fact that, and I'm going to switch to Quaker speak, that we can all be quaked by the Spirit, and that we can all have a message of love to share with, it could be our next door neighbor or whomever, and that there's an inner sage that we can learn to better listen to. In Quaker speak, it would be called the still small voice, but that's our inner sage, and it's accessible to all of us. So that's why. That's the Buddha. Then there's the Dharma. This is the laws of the universe, the physical laws and the spiritual laws of the universe. And we are a part of a flowering universe. I don't know where it came from. I can't really tell you why it's here, because that's beyond my head. But here we are in this flowering universe, and I'm looking at a teeny fraction right here in this room of material, stardust really, that is the universe waking up to itself. Now how amazing is that? And if we can learn how to tap and be in the flow of the flowering universe today, this day, then it's going to be a very full day. And so that's the Dharma, is learning how to be a part of the flow and flowering of the Dharma. Every day is a new flower. And then the Sangha, I'm looking at a field of Sangha. Sangha means community. And it certainly means the community of those who are listening or speaking here today. That's community. And we don't have to do this alone. We're not meant to do this alone. We're all interdependent after all. We have to remember this, and we have to come together with like-minded seekers, if at all possible, because that's so encouraging to our spirit to live a full life, is to be with others who are working to do the same. Now, Sangha is not limited to those listening or speaking. We have to remember that Sangha is all creatures, great and small, animate and inanimate. The whole planet is alive. The whole universe is alive. And The community is every aspect, every grain of sand, every drop of dew, every howling of the wind, the sunshine, we say, the flowers in spring, a cool breeze in summer, the moon in autumn, and snow in winter. If for you or I, there's no self-deluded cloud in our mind, it is a good season and a good day.
Thank you. No doubt about it, we are living in a time of great change and great challenge in our world, from war to climate change to deep structural poverty and systemic racism to disease. And Sanaa, you mentioned the importance of balance. So my question is, how does your faith tradition help you stay balanced or achieve balance as we, in our minds, and in some cases in our lives, wrestle with these huge challenges in our world?
Well, I will share what I do that helps. And it is supported by a teaching in the Quran, which I love. It says, wheresoever you turn, there is the face of God. And that doesn't make sense to me when I watch the news. But it does when I'm walking out in the woods or climbing. I love to hike. I love to be outdoors. I love flowers. And just the trees outside the window, they are giving away, they're surrendering to that force that is behind all that comes alive in spring. And that is the same force that I believe is behind our own breath. It's like Genio is talking about, there is a flower unfolding every day, and we are an integral part of that. So when I can be near a beautiful tree, or daffodils, or the amazing tulip fields we have just a few miles from here, there's something healing and something that helps me remember to be, as the Rabbi said, humble. It's way bigger than I am. And I choose to do my best to be a positive force in this unfolding. And that's all I can do.
I want to say I can't save the world. And that doesn't mean I can't help make it a better place. But it's not all on my shoulders. It is a collective experience where I have to do my part, not more and not less. And I have to ask myself with the discernment with my own inner sage, am I doing more than I should be? Am I doing less than I should be? And I try to make that assessment every day. It isn't about to save all beings, it's about to have a caring heart towards all beings. And when I look at systemic racism or war or nationalism or narcissism, wherever you find it, I just see wounds. I see how convoluted any of us can become, and disengaged from something vast and boundless, and stuck in our own narrow, egoistic instincts of survival view. And it can cause great harm. And so when I see that, I tear up, and I have great grief and sorrow and care and compassion and joy and ecstasy are all a part of life that I work my best not to hide from, but try to remember and assess, have I done my part?
So, I believe that Christianity, as seen in Jesus' life, indicates that we should be treating people as their children of God, beloved children of God. As far as balancing, that's a tough one for me, obviously. But in community, when I talked about passion, I think you try to think in terms of your passion in relationship to community, because that kind of helps balance out what you're doing and helps you determine what the balance, how much others can be doing, what their talents are. A lot of times, in fact, I taught Sunday school class for middle school kids because mine got so bored with the person that had been there, so we kept it moving. But years later, they were gone, and I was still teaching Sunday school class, and it was no longer bringing me joy. And so I finally said, well, I will stop doing that. And behold, people came out of the woodwork and took it over, and I should have done it much earlier. We got to learn to not just be the lone soldier moving forward by himself or herself, but to be in community and sense when it's time to let that go and move on to something else. So the balance part is in all those relationships, especially in community and your relationship with God. And so that's kind of how I would say it for balance.
I'm not, thanks a lot for sharing that. That's a good story. I love that, how you took over that class. Beautiful. You know, personally, I'm not that big on balance, because balance will only get you so far. I'm more for passion. You know, in our tradition, we really believe that we need passion, strength, a real sense of purpose to make the world a better place. So I'm so grateful that I live in a time we have passionate scientists who are working round the clock to figure out the challenges of COVID. I'm so grateful. I don't want any balance there. I want them to be working 24 hours a day. I really want them to go out there and just be in that laboratory all the time, because that's their chosen passion in life. And we need other people who are passionate about social justice, and not, that should be their total focus. We have a lot of things to solve. We believe very strongly that we are getting better. We are making progress. We are making change. And, compared to this time of history, going to the Middle Ages, they didn't have any way of curing illnesses. People just died. They just died. Black Plague, Black Death. Now we have scientists who are working so that you and I can live longer and healthier. And I'm so grateful for them. So I love the passion. And I think with passion, we'll overcome war, we'll overcome famine, we'll overcome greenhouse gases, we'll overcome disease. But we only can do it if people are really passionate about it and really, really work hard. So I believe that that's my vision. Everybody working really hard to make the world a better place. And I do believe we made a lot of progress. I think we made a lot of progress, and I also believe in the future we'll make more progress. So thank you out there, all you scientists, all you technicians, everyone who's working so hard to make this world a better place. And I bring passion in my own way to the world.
I also think balance is needed in the individualist perspective, that most, I'm number one, take care of me. I think most of us see what the end result is in a lot of terrible things happening. So to me, that's one place I wanted to be sure to mention. Another one is about humor and joy. A lot of times we get so serious. I mean, everything you see a lot of times just takes you there. But joy can really help heal you. That was brought up last week, and it's something I was participating in. They said if you can have joy, you can watch cartoons or do something just light that lifts your spirit. Literally, you just feel so much better, like you're walking on air. You can feel so much better, and it's better for you, and you really help others be lifted up too. So joy and inclusive of others, and not just centered on yourself.
I want to piggyback on what the Rabbi is saying. Something that I heard this morning along with the news about Ukraine is very exciting, that tomorrow morning they expect to launch the space shuttle that will carry 4 civilians to the space station for 10 days. I mean, to be able to do that, and God willing, they will succeed. There's always a risk, and I realize that. But to have the technology developed to that point, I have friends that will say, so we can destroy Mars as well as the Earth. And I don't want to go there, because the beauty and the creativity of medicine and science and what it can do in a positive realm is not undone by what a few people the way they will use it, in my opinion. So I join you in the excitement, but I also want the scientists to get enough sleep.
Okay, I want to ask one more question, get one more round of responses, and then we're going to have some time for question and answers with the audience. And it goes like this. How did your faith's understanding of death and what comes after death inform and help you with the decisions that you make now about your life?
So in the Buddhist tradition, there's the idea of reincarnation. So we have plenty of time. But from my own personal position when I am asked about reincarnation is I say I believe in recycling. You know, each one of us is a leaf on the tree of life. And there's no question in the first noble truth of Buddhism that we cannot avoid birth trauma, growing pains, sickness, old age and health, and death. We can't avoid these things. This is something that is real. The leaf is born, and then eventually in the fall it changes colors and falls and dissolves. This is the nature of the recycling. Now, what allows me, from my faith tradition, to make the most of this day in a caring, compassionate way, and in a passionate way too. I agree with Rabbi. Passion is inside of compassion. So, is to shift, especially as I'm aging, and I have more limitations, and I can see the colorful but withering approaching, that I need to even more shift my perspective to the branch and the trunk and the root. And if I am getting more skillful at shifting my perspective from the leaf perspective to the root perspective, then I'm able to live this day fully with a caring heart.
Islam teaches a lot about afterlife. And I believe, or for me anyway, it is a way of calling our attention to now, to every day. The basic teaching is there is a consequence for our actions. However small, however large, positive or negative. there is a noticing in the universe. If we are doing our best according to the wisdom within our own deep hearts, or whether we're acting from a more superficial ego point of view. And in Islam, the ego is not bad. It just needs to be trained like a wild horse. We want it to take us where we want to go. We don't want it to run wild and take us where it wants to go. But there is an afterlife in Islam, and it is mentioned more than it is in Judaism, and maybe equal to as much as in Christianity. But again, it's, as I have been taught, it's to focus on now, and my own actions now, and to choose wisely, and to be very aware of our intentions. I didn't think about that too much until I studied Islam, where again and again, every time we pray, we are called to set our intentions. And the intention is some version of getting closer to that mystery, which I agree with Genio, that it's better without a name, because then we fight over names and stuff like that. But that reality behind the blooming of flowers and budding trees, that reality that is within us every moment, if we can be aware of that, and be aware that that somehow has awareness of us, and we will be held responsible. If not in this life, in a next life.
Well, I often get people saying to me, as maybe contemplating death, I don't believe in the afterlife. And I always say to them, what you believe has nothing to do with what is. What you believe doesn't influence what is. You don't have to believe in the afterlife. If there is an afterlife, it's going to be there whether you believe in it or not. So I'm not too concerned about what you believe. Whatever it is will be.
I was told by my parents that when I was maybe 1 year old, there was another child born that died within just a few weeks. And so it made a big difference for my parents that they would see that little girl someday. And that touches me. And that's affected me all my life. Excuse me. So I am grateful for that. And that doesn't mean, I believe it, but it's really an emotional thing, as you can tell. And Jesus, I believe, it says that he rose again and is with us. And so keep your senses open to the Spirit and accept those audible calls from wherever they're coming from. And I've been amazed by timings of things. This is going off the subject, but it fits with where I'm heading. I see so many little miracles happen at the timing of things. Haven't you had times when something happened and you just were amazed? That's happening to me all the time. A recent example was a couple people came to Horizon House, and I organized that, and they came. The priest, Episcopal priest, brought a seminary student, and then when he introduced this intern, she has a Ph.D., she's a professor, and she's going to seminary almost as old as I did, but not quite. But what her Ph.D. is in and all that, wow. And so I talked with him afterwards, and within that day I told my boss, she told her boss. They lined her up because she wanted to come take some part-time a clinical pastoral education from me, and my boss is certified in that area. Now the point being, there were nudges there, and you make them happen, and I mean, because my boss left for Iona, Scotland, within a few days to arrange all that, and the time period that had to be done, amazing, just amazing, and things like that happen frequently. So there are things outside of us, if you're just aware and listen, and if you feel a little nudge about something, check it out. Be curious, and be thankful.
Great, thank you. I'm sure there must be a comment or a question or two from some of you in the group, and I think we've got some roving microphones. So if you hold your hand up high, we'll get a microphone to you. No one?
We haven't answered all the questions. We put them to sleep.
I think there's been great attention given. Here, I see one back here.
Cease right back there, please.
Oh, we have one here. Okay, good, great.
First of all, thank you all for coming. This has been amazing. I love when you talked about the Dharma. So, I used to work in a trauma hospital, and sometimes you leave and it was very stressful. And so I would go to Taizé prayer. And I think that was started by, wasn't it by the monks in Taizé, France, and it's at St. James Church. I don't care how bad I felt, how stressed I was, the church was full of people. And when I left there, I felt like a whole other person. Is that Dharma? Or in the category or not?
When we have that sense of timelessness and we've lost ourselves and we feel in the groove and like we're floating on air, we're riding the current of Dharma.
Oh, man, I experienced it many times.
I believe you.
It sounds to me like we have 4 different, as we would refer to them as religions or categories of religion, but it sounds like there's not as much difference as one thought. Everybody believes in God, everybody has a spirit talking to them of some sort. It might be called the Holy Spirit, might be just called an inner thought or whatever. It sounds like we're really all talking about the same thing, just one speaking Spanish and one speaking Italian or something. Can you agree with that or disagree with that?
Right on.
Rabbi and I have been doing this for 30 years or more. Sometimes we refer to it as the dog and pony show,
Yes, I see one, Mariana.
Thank you for being here. It's very inspiring. I think there's been a lot of loss in the pandemic and a lot of hope that things could go back to the way that they were. And I wonder if you could help with some guidance about that. I mean, we're not 21 anymore and all excited about how everything's going to change. So any words that you could use to help us with going forward instead of going back?
I can share what gives me hope, and as I said towards the beginning, what gives me hope most is the goodness within people. And on the table, on the way out, if you're interested, I have some leftover cards from past interfaith programs I've done. And all it is a list of values that are taken from all the scriptures and condensed down. I think there are 52 or something like that. And these are attributes and they're called virtues in the Judeo-Christian tradition. They're also called virtues in Islam, and they're desirable qualities that human beings are all capable of, and again, it's a balance between them. We don't want just justice without any mercy, or just mercy without any justice. It's finding the right balance among these qualities. And I believe as we try to emphasize them more in our lives, with all the noise about all the horrible stuff that we hear about and should, we need to know about it. But it helps me have something to work on, to focus on. I want to be a greater person of integrity. I want my word to mean it when I say it, etc., etc. You know them. It's just, they're on a card, so I'm trying to reinforce it in myself and others. So that gives me hope. It's the potential for good within every human being, and how we can focus on that, and God willing, develop it more, no matter what age we are.
I don't want to be a downer, but we have to say, everybody here is going to die. We all know that. Probably not of COVID, frankly. Probably not going to die of COVID. Odds are not that great. But the thing about COVID, which is interesting, is we have these great scientists who've come so far, and I bet probably most people in this room have been vaccinated, maybe got a booster, maybe got 2 boosters. But you also have to remember the scientists who came up with these great vaccinations, the similar scientists came up with the medicines that if we do get COVID, these antiviral medicines, that we can be treated for it. So that's a really positive thing. It doesn't mean you're going to live forever. We're all going to die from something. You could exercise every day, good thing to do, I do. You can eat very healthy food, good, not going to live forever. But in terms of COVID, we have to be very, very grateful, extremely grateful, and very optimistic. Because the reality is that because of the scientific, advances, it's not going to be we are, middle class people living in America, fortunately, probably not going to die of COVID. That's an amazing thing. That is a truly amazing thing. Doesn't take away the fact that millions of people have died from it, which is sad, tragic. But we're not going to die from that. So let's be very grateful and take care of yourselves as much best as you can. And if you feel that wearing a mask is going to help you a little bit more, wear a mask. If you want to be more socially isolated, that's fine also. So that's all I can say, is that we've made a lot of progress.
Well, time for one more, if anyone has a question.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm forever thrown awry by the fact that there are so many people out there who think they have the answer. I'm not talking about religious groups. I'm talking about individuals who are pumped up with themselves and perpetuating false rumors, false news, whatever you want to call it. As religious representatives, do you have any charm that we might use with such people? Because they seem unable or unwilling to speak to the concept of Dharma, the concept of flowering, the concept of community. And as a former Peace Corps volunteer who thought I would save the world, and obviously haven't, I'm still a believer in progress, but I'm also an old lady who is crying for what hasn't changed. So, can you give us a pearl of wisdom that we can propagate among the unthinking, the unmindful, the egos who are only thinking about themselves? Thank you.
You know, the key is to find commonality with anybody that you're with or meet. If we can find the commonality or the common ground, and we may have to ignore quite a few areas in order to find the common ground, but the more that we find any common ground of being human beings and living on this planet together, then we're bound to make progress. We have to be careful not to, I can't put the past in my hand, I can't put the future in my hand, I only have the present. And in the present, I would like to think that I can find some way to strike up a conversation with anybody. And if anytime I press on delusions, there will be an equal and opposite force. So if I am of the opinion, and it's my opinion, that their opinion is deluded, I'm going to skip that area. And I will divert them from hooking on to my opinions, which they think are deluded. And I'm going to go for how can I get past my preferences and opinions in a way to get past their preferences and opinions and find some way to go walk in the woods or share a cup of tea or talk about our family of origin or something. Find the common ground, because then I do have optimism that we will see the inner value, the Jesus nature, the Buddha nature, the treasure that each one of us are. When we look for it, it's there.
Let me piggyback on that. I agree about trying to reach out and talk with people what you have in common. How many of you marched, men or women and women, marched in the Women's March several years ago? Yeah, quite a few, really. I called it the Women's Stand because it took an hour before some of us could even leave where they started. When there were over 50,000, nobody expected that many. But anyway, when I returned to Horizon House, where I worked part-time, there was a lady and there were another person in the mailroom. We were chatting, and she made sure I remembered that she was the enemy because she's the atheist that has a group of people that meet together and fuss about all of us. But she was in that march too. And I said, well, we know that social justice is important, don't we? And in fact, the church my husband plays organ for, University Congregational, UCC, they say social justice is a spiritual practice. And I want to say that's one area that we can all work on together and share, find places, maybe parts of that people won't agree with you on, but other parts of it they will. But I think that's one of the hopes, because there's a lot of effort, things being raised to our attention that we can address.
I need to pull this to a close, and on your behalf, thank our panelists. This is a key time of the year for several of you in your faith traditions, coming up on Holy Week during the time of Ramadan. And we thank you so much for taking this time to share with us and to bring your gifts to us. And so, join me in thanking you. And now we have a special treat with some special music. And we need the musicians to arrive. Carol and Werner Henn will offer some special music for us to close today's program.
Some time ago, Tom approached me and asked Carol and me to sing a song that he had heard that he felt really applied to how we deal with our spirituality as we age. I'd like to read a little background on this. Life yields many circumstances we cannot avoid. As mortals, our bodies grow frail, and our mental capacities may diminish over the years. What does one do in these instances? Mary Louise Bringle wrote, "When memory fades," for a friend whose mother was suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Bringle's sensitivity to this passage in life's journey and attentiveness to the needs of the world has contributed to her recognition as one of the leading hymn writers in the English language today. When Memory Fades is a hymn that touches on life, both mortal and spiritual, written specifically for the tune Finlandia, the stirring theme from the orchestral work of the same name by Jean Sibelius, who died in 1957. Its rhythmic and melodic solemnity are well suited to the honesty of hesitation and hope in the words. This hymn text, prompting one to acknowledge the frailty, inadequacies of our earthly vessels, looks to God, who is the source of all life. Dr. Bringle guides the singer through emotions of petition, grieving, and gratitude. Rather than asking for healing, she is concerned about remembering and declaring who God is in the midst of this situation. Dr. Marie Louise Mel Bringle is a professor at Brevard College, Brevard, North Carolina, where she teaches philosophy and religious studies. She received her Ph.D. from Emory University and attends Trinity Presbyterian Church, where she is an elder. She's also a recent president of the Hymn Society in the United States and Canada, and served as the chair of the Presbyterian Committee on Congregational Song, the group responsible for the most recent Presbyterian PCUSA hymnal. This hymn was first published in 2002 by GIA Publishing. When memory fades and recognition falters, when eyes we love grow dim and minds confused, speak to our souls of love that never alters, speak to our hearts by pain and fear abused. Oh God of life and healing peace, empower us with patient courage by your grace infused. As frailness grows and youthful strengths diminish, in weary arms that work their earnest fill, your aging servants labor now to finish their earthly task as fits your mysteries will. We grieve their waning, yet rejoice, believing your arms unwearied shall uphold us still. Within your spirit, goodness lives unfading.
Thank you so much. And our next Empowered Aging session will be on Friday, May the 13th. And it will focus on End of Life Washington. We'll present the program. It will help us focus on our own wishes and how to communicate those wishes to our family and to our caregivers about how we choose to die, want to die. And so please mark your calendars for that and plan to come on May the 13th. Thank you so much for today.